Ekchay Hachamapi. Hello everyone. I'm Isabella Santana, actress, producer at the NGO If Not As In Who, host of this podcast, and Pataxó, indigenous nation of the south of Bahia, northeast of Brazil. This is a very special podcast where we'll be having amazing guest speakers and we'll be talking about how our narratives are connected to the land and how the land is the guardian of our identities. In this episode, we are going to talk with a very lovely and special person, Nonette Royo from Philippines. She will be sharing about her work, but also about her dreams, hopes, childhood, family, and identity as well. We invite you all to listen to us and to enjoy. Tapu tatu meton, too happy, let's go. And yeah, it's a pleasure to be here with Nonette Royo. She is a mother. We are talking that she was an auntie too, a sister, author, activist, indigenous advocate, many things. Executive director of Tenure Facility, many things. So, so yeah.
Hi.
Hello.
Very happy to be here. Very honored to be here. Yeah.
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 So you were saying that one of the biggest things, more than motherhood, is auntyhood. Tell me a little bit about it again.
Yeah, it's a thing that we women sisters take on when the time comes. And that comes with a sense of just flow. When children of friends, sisters in the broader sense, and sisters in the community come and ask for all sorts of questions and about life, about meaning, about getting their computer repaired and having no money for it, figuring out options for college, writing letters about what they dream of. I mean, I feel very honored to even be asked. And then I feel, again, very grateful in that sense when I'm being considered that in a way that is very, what's the word for it? It's very natural. So the sense of connection with the community and family over time for me has just grown. So it started when I was just a teenager, when I started to begin supporting a few of these adoptive, extended nephews and nieces. Tita is the word that we use in the Philippines, just tita, auntie. And now it's just become. It's almost like my tie to the future that we're talking about. And my connection to that is through these aspirations and dreams and hopes of many of the community members that I feel and I strongly feel I'm still related to as an auntie, as a tita.
Yeah. And tell me more about your work and how this is connected with the fact that you're also a tita, like how the little ones inspire you to do your work of all these years.
Yeah, so I've been I know it. I've written it in my diary at 11. At the age of 11, I said, I'm going to become a lawyer to make sure that I am empowered, or I feel I have the power to defend indigenous peoples with their land rights. And to this day, I'm still curious what triggered that. But I think reflecting on it, I think now I'm doing this, and I've never really changed careers. Since I was 11, I was aspiring to be it, and I did it. And it's, I think, because I have over the years, my father's an indigenous healer, And his community has been separated over time. The coastal communities are the first ones dispersed, especially the healers, the ones that do their what's considered as not as Christian in practice, right? When the indigenous peoples are Christianized in many of these Christianized states, the ones from the coastal areas are the first ones to break, quote unquote break. But they have adapted. They've adapted in the sense that they've become able to practice by just connecting Christ to the universe and the gods that they know about. So I've grown in that space and felt very much like a listener to stories that have been told of what was and are not are now. And I woke up to the huge challenge of deprivation of land rights during the Marcos regime in the Philippines. As it was a dictator. He's one of those people that I felt used the power of the law and then eventually shifted and became who we don't want him to be. So waking up to those stories of just huge displacements, challenges that indigenous peoples day to day have to face to keep their land, and that's, I think that's when I decided I would be helpful. I could probably not risk dying in the process, so I just become a lawyer. So I would be the sort of the go-between and help them negotiate, because I know the extent of that struggle was people are dying and people are killed, right? And I was very scared of that part.
Yeah, and you wanted to be a lawyer at such a young age, right? Yeah, like I feel very related when you say about I identify with the story of my people as well when you say about the coast, because my people is also from the coast, Pataxó Nation south of Bahia, and yeah, we got very dispersed and went to the big cities. So I've grew up in a background completely different from the ones that grew up in the village. So I didn't like learn everything from the culture and like lived in deep nature and everything. So I wanted to hear from you, how was your background? Because you decided to be like, you wanted to be a lawyer at such a young age. So did you talked about politics in your house? How was your background like?
Yeah, my father was a Spanish teacher, and when I asked him, why did you become a Spanish teacher, he goes like, well, the Spaniards made us look really poor and unvaluable, devalued. So I wanted to make sure I level off with them by learning their language. And so he worked his way through as a kid because he lost his parents early, and became a very bright scholar. And the Jesuits sent him on to the university, and he chose Spanish. He became a court interpreter, and my politics was when he was telling the family about his cases in court. And the court, he writes the decisions of the judge. He was a clerk of court, and and he would take me to his territory, which is not, it's dispersed now, but he kept what he could, I think, by buying it off, right? So then as a little kid, I would remember just being in total darkness, holding his hand in between large trees that I was so afraid of, but I knew it was his voice, it was his hand, and he would just whistle and say, everything's fine. This is a friendly place. I go like, it doesn't really look very friendly to me because it's dark and it's all these trees, and that's when I remembered, that he would just say, there are people who know how to protect this area. There are people that when he met people, these are like beings who know how to take care of us. So he was not just talking people, humans. He was talking more beyond that. So that was kind of a close memory to me of how I felt. This is a deeper story that he was only willing to tell me a little bit for me to discover. And so that was what kept me curious and kept inquiring. And I would sometimes sit in other tribes, rituals, and see and see and begin to discover what's in between those lines of peoples and peoples. Yeah.
Yeah, in my culture, we call the spirits the Nao, which are like our ancestors that live in the forests. And like they are here now, like they are always with us and guiding us. And is this the same in your culture? Like the spirits are always with you and are guiding you in all the work you do?
It's the same. And it's the same. And my father married my mother, who was an ex-nun, and everything to her is Christ and Christian, and that. And he the way he smiles and looks at me and says, "Yeah, of course it's Christ, it's Christian, it's God," and that's where it's sort of what's the word for it? It became universalized in that form for me. So you can call it different. And actually, this is where I grew up also in an area where conflict is so intense with the tribes that are Islamized, right? And there are tribes that are Christianized. And somehow the conflict was between Christians and Muslims. But it's not. These are tribes, Islamized tribes and Christianized tribes, and they're all indigenous. And they have different indigenous names and different indigenous languages. And so this is where I've kind of realized the complexities, especially in that southern part of the Philippines. Yeah.
Yeah, and we as indigenous people, we want to like keep our ancestors alive and the spirits alive. So even with the Christian and the Bible and everything getting in like trying to like eat our cultures, we still use it as a form of resistance. So even if we say Jesus Christ or God, deep inside we know that we are not talking about Jesus Christ and God, but because we recognize the force of the
Yes.
Nao, the spirits we are talking about.
Exactly.
So, and yeah, like
Yeah.
in Patasha we also have like the prayers, and I come from the lineage of prayers, and they use the words Christ and God, but to bring
Exactly.
the other strength.
Exactly. The Aborigines do the same. Yeah, it's just amazing how the spirit lives in this universal form. And it's alam semesta, they call it in Indonesian. It's just a universe. And there's only 5 religions in Indonesia that's accepted. But when you say alam semesta, it just includes everything. And that's why I think I feel that's the home of what my father was talking about. That's the core of it. And that's why I can relate in a way that I cannot consciously rationalize. It's only from the heart that I can relate with it.
Yeah, and talking about heart and love, I see that the work that you do, must be done with lots and lots of love. And I wanted you to talk about like this territory you live in. Like, explain me a little bit. I've never been to Philippines. Yeah, and yeah, like talk a little bit about this territory. Like,
Well, in the Philippines, Manuvu, Camiguingnon Manuvu is a huge area of Manuvus all over southern Philippines. But there, Camiguingnon is the island where my father's from, and many other Manuvus live around the whole archipelago, and these are now, except for the really classified forests, distributed to all sorts of private owners, right? But what the Philippines has then reached during the constitutional change during the EDSA revolution, which I was a part of in 1986-87, was we got to a level where we changed the constitution where indigenous peoples are recognized as indigenous cultural communities, and then a law that recognizes indigenous peoples whose lands were taken away and were unrecognized during the Regalian Doctrine were able to re-register their land for as ancestral domains, ancestral territories. That was just in 1987, right? So and I was growing up as a kid and became a lawyer in 1988. So we were doing a lot of work then during that time to influence that process. So many indigenous peoples groups, and anthropologists were doing that. So the Philippine Indigenous Peoples Ancestral Domains Law is a very important landmark law now in the Philippines that recognize territories as collective. And so I am a witness to that and a lawyer to help that happen. Our territory is gone, but my father's he's repurchased some portion of the land that he is now, where his memory is, where all of the brothers and sisters that are still alive, and there's not many. There's only one left actually, and the children are coming together now to revisit that place. But in terms of I don't consider myself a people in that sense because the community has dispersed. But I've now belonged to the advocates, lawyers of indigenous peoples whose roots may not come back as purely as the others. But I am part of that bigger brotherhood and sisterhood of indigenous communities that are now dispersed, right? But we'll remember and we'll go back to the land as much as I can. But now is also an individual. Now I'm an individual trying to make or do as much as I can to enable those that still have their territory to keep their territories, not just in the Philippines, but now in my role as the Tenure Facility Executive Director, to support those who can and to make sure that we can reverse the narrative of displacements so we can reclaim that which nature is asking us as stewards to do, to survive as a people, to protect nature and to keep that relationship alive again.
Yeah, so even if you was born out of the territory where the peoples were living in, the land kept in your heart was still in your heart. So even though it was a very violent displacement, and that wasn't your choice, and that it's not our choice to be born out of the territory, but there was also a purpose. You found a purpose in your work by being born out of the territory, and I think that the returning process showed the strength of our roots, because even though we were born completely out, you had the choice of becoming a lawyer, and you had the choice of keep working and returning, and that's beautiful. Yeah. That's very beautiful. And I relate a lot to that. I relate a lot because I also was born outside, and I am in this path of returning, and your story inspires me a lot.
Thank you. Yeah.
And by working decades and decades with indigenous advocacy and returning and everything, how do you think that the young Nonette will see the today Nonette?
That's so funny. I mirror. I have 3 daughters, right, who are very much in this work, and I did not even expect that they would. But I think because my heart is what they see, even if I was mostly gone, doing all my lawyering all of their lives. I had sisters who are carers of my children, in Indonesia at the time when they were growing up there. They now very much rooted in the heart space of being indigenous. And my oldest is a singer-songwriter, and her inspiration is coming from that. Her first songs, the ones she writes when she was still, really little kid, is about this, connection to the land, understanding the diversities, being in darkness and finding light there, and turning that darkness into something that is the source of light, because you just go into the middle of it and you see that there's so much of it. So that to me is the young Nonette that's looking at the old in a way through the lenses of my daughters. A big part of their critical thinking is coming from that young Nonette spirit. I feel very much a part, that when our higher selves are critical to our real selves, it's almost like that. I'm seeing the mirror of a very critical Nonette that's young and idealistic in the Nonette now that's kind of practical and trying to solve problems and getting, these funds flowing to the work that we do, that sometimes can really restrict the vision in many ways, right? And it's a hard, complex decision-making process now, where we work with governments. We have money that's supposed to already be given to the indigenous peoples, but they have so many restrictions, and we have to follow them.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's painful in a way, and the indigenous peoples resist, and I have direct feedback from other indigenous people's groups that says, like, why are you doing that? You're supposed to help us. You're not a donor. You're part of us. And so this type of questions that reshape and shape and keep challenging this work, I welcome. It's not easy. It's not easy. It's painful sometimes to be misunderstood because of that. But it's there. Yeah, and that's the young Nonette looking at the in a way that yeah, and in allowance to be transformed by that, because we never stop learning. We have to keep transforming.
Yeah.
I think for this work to happen.
She would be very proud because, like, at 11, she wanted to be a lawyer, and she was like, okay, I went to the right step. Yeah, like, in terms of you're mentioning your work, and I wanted to know a little bit about your work at the Tenure Facility, and with that, like, bring up the question about, like, if there's any challenges, big challenges, or yeah, what are the challenges of the work you do, like individually or within the communities? Anything you'd like to share about it?
Yeah. So my challenge personally is to remind myself and to remind the people I work with that we're a blip in a 7th-generation vision. So when I've learned so much about the pieces that I'm trying to put together is like, how do we really do this? And that which inspires me is the vision of the 7 generations. You're not doing this just now. You're actually doing this work now because you want the next generation and the next generation and the next generation to continue to be able to connect with the mission or the vision of what's the word for it, is of reciprocity, because we are stewards of the earth. We're stewards of the planet. And so, I've been listening and hearing about the Aborigine vision of, you just come back you come back in as a child after how many generations, right? So my challenge is that our work now is, let's say, channeling huge amounts of money to indigenous peoples' organizations to allow them to at least protect and stay in their territories. And these territories are very much the place that people, not only people occupy, but other beings, mycelium, animals, everything else, right? And spirit and stone and everything else. And that is not an easy one to communicate to the modern world. And when money comes into that territory, it's another challenge. So the money that I'm trying to raise, and we have managed to raise, is to make sure that the territories are secure, that we get collective paper title. And maybe the title will take 5 years, 2 years, 1 year, or maybe 10 years. But the idea is, if you understand that this is from a work of this generation, it means that the people will not disband. The young people will come back. They will bring what they've learned from the outside world and the science woven into traditional knowledge, just passed on from generation to generation, that are riddles, that are things that we solve as humans at this time, and will be completed together, right? Not to disband, but to come together and to complete that. So not to miss the point of protecting the earth, protecting forests, protecting nature, protecting ourselves, relating with others, and these protocols that keep us together. So my chance is that the sooner we can secure the territory, the better they can make decisions for the earth, for the stewardship of the planet. If we don't secure these territories now, so many people want to grab it. Everybody wants to grab it, even for good reasons, now, right? Good reasons. Green, something like that. But the indigenous people's messages are very clear about the holistic sort of understanding of life and being, and this connection and interdependence. And so that's where I feel I can't do this alone. I can only do this with indigenous peoples that are really leading the way, and the manner of getting that together, and with the others that are also helping, is contextual. So it's different for every country, for every community, and that's how we have to grapple with the complexity of it. So give money to indigenous peoples, and then make sure that we don't lose the core of why we're doing this work. For their land rights, right? So because this money for us is for land rights, very specific. So for Tenure Facility, that's what we're aiming for. And for as many indigenous peoples groups as possible. Yeah, and local community groups also.
Can you explain just a brief explanation about Tenure Facility for whoever is listening to us?
Yeah, so the Tenure Facility is a facility that supports indigenous peoples to make sure their land rights are protected. And so that means indigenous peoples who have been fighting for their land rights get funding to make sure they do that for the long haul. And our courage now is to with certainty say we can be there for 5 years with you, and we can be there with you for this amount of money. And the amount of money is not small. And I'll just give you an example, plus minus $1 million per indigenous community group for the next 5 years. And we've worked hard to make sure that is not just a promise, it's reality. We've got that money saved up in the bank for them. But now how does that money land to the indigenous community group? And that's our greatest opportunity, but also it's the greatest challenge, because of all these things that I talked about, restrictions and systems and trust and sustainability and all of this. So, but that's what the Tenure Facility does, is just to make sure that happens. And we're very few. We're not going to create big offices, because that means the money will go to the offices instead of to the indigenous peoples, right? And my hope is that indigenous peoples themselves can take this over after 5 years, that our donors go to them. They don't have to go to us. And this is what they're saying now in the Global Alliance. Give the money to us. And then some of these donors say, like, but you cannot manage $1 million. Can you? And so some of them can now. They're very strong. So they're ahead. So they're ahead of the game. So what we're trying to be doing now is we can essentially make sure this flows quickly. So as many that can go through and set up their systems and manage and then finish the 5 years and take off and get the donors. Just go directly to them. You don't have to sort of suspect that this is an institution that's not ready for that kind of investment. So that's what we do, in a way.
Yeah, and within that, is there any teaching you would like to share about dealing with like with everything that you do in your work with like money and lands and how to organize that within the communities? Is there any like teaching that you carry all the time with you to deal with all of this work?
Yeah. Yeah, I guess I've kind of figured with our team. I keep sharing, and this is actually what I also shared with the family. Is love is one, and that means inclusiveness. That means trust. That means honesty. And so the learning there is that there may be enemies and there may be others that we don't really trust, but the way the indigenous peoples protocols have kind of taught me over the years is that you can relate with people with that space of love. It makes them vulnerable, but it's so strong. It's so strong and inclusive, and in a way that's the one that is life for the planet and for them as a people. So that's one. The learning is there. Figure out how you can trust people, be open, be curious, ask what's possible, and that to me is key. For example, in our work and even in fundraising, don't dismiss, be curious, ask, and figure out, and that openness is coming from that space of how is it possible for us to work together. And the second is learning to keep what we've known over the years and not to distrust that's passed on from generation to generation. And sometimes they're just pieces of the knowledge. And this is why I loved braiding sweetgrass, the skitagen, the reconnecting, the figuring out the pieces so we can put it together so we understand. Because it's always been a riddle, and it will always be a riddle for us. And we need to put it together, the pieces of knowledge. And that's learning for us. And that's not exclusive, it's inclusive. And that's really important. And then the other part is fun, laughter, just being together, rituals, dancing, singing, being crazy. It's a difficult world, but hey, we're people.
Exactly.
Yeah, let's sing, let's dance, let's cry it out if we need to cry. But hey, this is just this lifetime right now, and we don't know what we will become in the next. But yeah, let's do that.
Yeah. For sure, yeah. So much pain, we also need to have our time to laugh and, as you say, be crazy. And celebrate.
Yeah, celebrate. Yeah, and you have to meet my daughters because they keep asking me this question of, Mama, am I indigenous or not? I said, you know what, just stay and trust your heart. We're all together in this planet, and we have all different roles, and we're mixed, and we're complex. Our stories are so deeply difficult and happy, and we're combined. And the father's now I'm married to an Irish fourth generation American, but fewer 100% Irish, and so from the the Irish traditions, I've been reading about their stories, and I kept feeling like there's a story there that you need to discover. Of that.
Yeah. Yeah, like in the northeast of Brazil, we are very, very, very mixed. Very mixed.
Yeah.
Like I have black and indigenous Pataxó, and also like my grandfather was from Netherlands, and then my grandmother is black and indigenous, and it's very mixed. And my mother's side is white from Minas Gerais, and also a little bit indigenous. So we are very mixed. And one thing that helps me a lot within like how do I see myself and how do I put this identity out of the world is like hearing stories of other indigenous women and of other indigenous people, so I can like find a point of relation, you know. Like when I was a kid, I was in the process of recognizing me as an indigenous woman. I wasn't like born knowing who I was. I think that's something that happens when we are indigenous. Like sometimes we don't born if we are born out of our villages, we don't like know we are indigenous right away, you know. So
yeah, exactly. You
it's a
wake up to
process.
it, you discover it. Something speaks
Yeah,
inside about that, and it's a very, very long journey of discovery. Yeah.
yeah, and like I said, it's not like an option. It's
Yeah.
something that we had to go through, and I think that the main thing is just being true to yourselves and your story and your ancestors, and like you said to your daughter, be true to yourself, and that's the way. And yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, so Nonette, it was such a nice talk. Like, I couldn't even see the time passing. And I really wanted to thank you for being here, for accepting the invitation. And Nichiaweri, we say thank you lots.
Nichiaweri.
Nichiaweri. And yes.
Salamat.
Yeah. And I want to invite you, everyone that is listening to us, to follow our channel, follow Impact Storytellers podcast, and pay attention to everything that is coming up. Thank you.
Thank you.
So, I just gave a very beautiful necklace to Nonette from the Pataxó territory made by indigenous women, and we call it a live necklace
Thank you
because it's
so
made of
much.
alive seeds, and you can take care of it by adding coconut oil and maybe
Yes.
putting it in the sun.
Yeah, I have that with me in my bag.
Amazing. Okay. So yeah,
Thank you, please.
thank you too. Yeah, that's it.